From leading protagonists conquering crippling fears in their bids to deliver the legit goods, to actors staring death in the face whilst trying to get a thrilling shot in the can, these jaw-dropping and sometimes petrifying behind-the-scenes tales will change the way you look at the following scenes and moments forever. Gareth here from Whatculture.com, and here are film and TV moments more terrifying when you know the truth. A real pilot was too terrified to give one extreme stunt another go. Top Gun Maverick. Tom Cruise is the sort who would quite happily give an utterly terrifying stunt another few goes in order to ensure it's in the can. And probably for the sheer joy of it too. But not everyone was as happy to keep the stunt show a-going while shooting his most recent big screen smash of Top Gun Maverick. In fact, one of the genuine pilots tasked with executing some of the death-defying stunts in the film classed one particular sequence as something that was simply too extreme to do again. As director Joseph Kosinski would explain to Empire, ace real-life pilot Frank Walleye Weiser was in charge of flying the jet for the thrilling and highly dangerous moment that sees Cruise's Maverick prove that the film's impossible run is anything but. Yet after touching down the plane that also contained Cruise at 550 knots, going 30 feet above ground, Walleye would simply ask, "Did you get it?" And after receiving the thumbs up, he soon followed that up with a "good because I'm never doing that again," which probably tells you how damn frightening the whole experience must have been for even the most seasoned of pros. Cruise would have probably done it again though, right? That jump scare caught the actors by surprise too, the haunting of Hill House. The visual of Victoria Pedretti's ghostly Nell suddenly firing up between Theo and Shirley mid-drive was the stuff of TV nightmares, wasn't it? In truth though, it wasn't just fans taking in the Netflix slice of horror that were deeply disturbed by the shocking arrival. The actors on set and the folks behind the monitor all crapped their pants too. That's because, according to showrunner Mike Flanagan, Victoria was under strict orders to pop up much earlier in the scene than castmates Kate Siegel and Elizabeth Reeser thought she would. In fact, those two assumed they had another half a page of lines to go before Victoria would break up the conversation. That is one way of putting it. However, during the first take of the sequence, Pedretti very much caught the two by surprise, and the resulting reactions, as Flanagan put it, were genuine. Hell, Flanagan would even confess that the folks behind the monitor were all aware it was coming, but still couldn't stop themselves from jumping in their seats at the horrifying early interruption. You know you've done something right if a scare you're fully expecting still catches you completely off guard, eh? No acting was necessary for some scary stunts involving Tom Holland flying high, Uncharted. There wasn't actually a web in sight when it came time for the set piece the Spider-Man star classes as the biggest, hardest, and one of the scariest he's ever been involved in. That's because the moment in question came during Uncharted's pulsating cargo drop opening, a scene that involved Tom Holland's Nathan Drake clinging onto various swinging boxes as he hangs out the back of an aeroplane, as you do. Far from a CGI fest from start to finish though, this moment did actually require Holland to spin around on boxes that were suspended 100 feet in the air at times, with the star being tasked with holding onto the contraptions until they genuinely launched him off too. In fact, the entire thing was so legitimately frightening to shoot that Holland didn't really need to act at all that much in the end. As he noted in a featurette for the film, it was really scary, but I think that level of fear just makes that scene that much more authentic. Ellen Pompeo wasn't too happy about doing one particularly dangerous stunt, Grey's Anatomy. The last thing a performer would likely want to deal with on the back of a seemingly never-ending shift on set is the idea of offering their body up for a piece of action that has just left a stunt person needing to go through concussion protocol. But that's precisely the unenviable situation Ellen Pompeo found herself in when shooting Grey's Anatomy's jaw-dropping bomb explosion scene during Season 2's As We Know It episode. After already working for something like 17 hours and confessing to being exhausted, the reality of a young stuntwoman slamming her head down hard during the first attempt at yanking Meredith Grey away from the stunt explosion left episode director Peter Horton with no choice but to use Ellen instead. One inevitable screaming match later, a brassed-off Pompeo took part in said dangerous stunt, only for Horton to still use the majority of the take that saw the young stuntwoman's head legit bounce off the floor. And with all that in mind, you'll likely never look at this explosive moment the same way ever again. Gerard Butler was almost defeated by a few scary waves, chasing Mavericks. An excuse to learn what it took to surf soon turned into something of a nightmare for the action star in the end, with Gerard Butler eventually noting to the Graham Norton show just how close he came to drowning after being hit by one particularly hazardous wave while shooting one of Chasing Maverick's daring surfing moments. Despite the whole movie crew witnessing their leading man be fully taken out by a 30-foot wave, Butler would still later claim that he wanted to return to the sea on the same day, due to the feeling of hitting the water being pretty addictive. As each new wave came though, Butler continued to be turned over and dragged down for around a minute until he finally came up for air. And after briefly thinking, wow, I'm gonna die making a movie. Chasing Mavericks may not have made much of a splash at the box office, but that doesn't change the fact that Butler still put it all on the line for the sake of authentically riding some truly intimidating waves. And the overwhelming reality behind one of Walter White's darkest hours, Breaking Bad. Few would argue against the moment Walter White opts to leave Jesse Pinkman's girlfriend Jane Margolis to die as the most horrifying Breaking Bad sequence of the lot, and that horror extended onto the set itself when it came time to shoot the horrific visual of Jane choking on her own vomit in her sleep, with Kristen Ritter noting how the experience of acting during the entire death sequence was overwhelming. Ritter wasn't the only one who found the hugely dark moments somewhat difficult to execute. Bryan Cranston would later confess to ultimately seeing his own daughter's face in the thick of Ritter's convincing performance too, something that sits as a parent's worst fear come to life. Aaron Paul would also admit that the subsequent moment that saw Jesse realise his girlfriend was dead had an emotional toll on him, before adding, "I was so devastated that I just couldn't come back from it." In isolation, the hard-to-watch scenes are up there with some of the most startling and heartbreaking moments ever to be unleashed on television, and the additional knowledge of the actors themselves going through hell in the making of them only adds to the distressing ordeal. Brendan Fraser nearly choked to death in the hanging sequence. The Mummy. While nowadays the chances of an actor genuinely having their life choked out of them for the sake of a decent looking take are somewhat slimmer, the same could not be said when it came time for the Rick O'Connell star to hang from a rope in the first Mummy adventure. With director Stephen Sommers not really feeling Brendan Fraser's first close-up attempts at selling the idea of his character legitimately struggling for his life, he soon called for the tension to be taken up on the rope for the following take. What could go wrong, eh? The George of the Jungle thespian actually soon found himself on the receiving end of the hanging rope being taken up twice, and it wasn't long before the actor genuinely passed out mid-take. And while Sommers would go on record to claim that it was actually his leading man's fault for trying to make the moment feel as legit as possible, either way, the finished shot used in the movie was the one that actually saw Fraser lose consciousness. As the actor put it, they had to cut away because moments later I was out of it. A fiery moment nearly got out of hand. What we do in the shadows. The vampires found occupying the TV corner of the mockumentary world of What We Do in the Shadows aren't what you'd class as the sort capable of keeping you awake at night. That's not to say that the process of bringing one of these hilarious undead entities to the small screen is completely devoid of legit terror though. In fact, in the case of Naja actor Natasya Demetriou, one particular scene involving her 500-year-old Greek Romani vampire feeling the heat brought with it some very real on-set dread. According to the actor herself, the finale of season 1 sequence that involved Nadia's hands suddenly combusting in the middle of a funeral genuinely left Demetriou thinking she may lose her mitts. That's because the person in charge of special effects had put a little too much paste on her hands. And sure enough, things got a little bit out of control quite quickly. Unfortunately for Natasya, everyone present just thought her cries of "help, help" were in character. So for about 5 seconds there, she honestly thought one of her hands was done for. Thankfully, the fire was put out before her dress and the remainder of her body went up in flames. Damn that fire paste. Matthew Fox was stabbed by an anything but fake knife. Lost. Jumping back to the lost moment that saw Matthew Fox's Jack Shephard battle it out with Terry O'Quinn's on-screen character, during the show's finale, the pair's throwdown eventually led to the former being stabbed by the latter. The plan was to swap in a fake knife just before the all-important shot of Fox being shivved by the John Locke actor. Only instead of reaching for the fake blade just before the moment he would plunge the dagger into Jack's side, O'Quinn made one hell of a blunder mid-wrestling match. Forgetting to hold his hand out for the exchanging of the blades in the heat of the moment, O'Quinn legit drove the real knife into a thankfully padded up Fox. Adding that little more drama to an already intense moment of action, it soon dawned on O'Quinn what had happened upon witnessing Fox roll off of him, and the rest of the crew bizarrely laughing at his screw-up. Fox may have escaped a legit stab wound thanks to his protective vest, but had the original call for the actor to drop the vest due to it looking too fake been stuck to, things could have got a little too real for all involved. Henry Cavill was completely deaf whilst hanging out of a helicopter. Mission Impossible Fallout. The demanding act of physically transforming into the Man of Steel or Geralt of Rivia pales in comparison to the difficulties Henry Cavill faced when hunting down Tom Cruise in a helicopter, with Cavill revealing to Collider recently what actually went into the riveting copter chase through the Southern Alps seen in Mission Impossible Fallout. With his relentless assassin August Walker doing everything he could to bring Ethan Hunt down, Cavill very much had to stick his head out of a moving flying vehicle and fire blanks into the freezing wind. And if the concept of actually hanging out of a helicopter that high up wasn't terrifying enough, Cavill was also completely deaf throughout, with only a pilot's gestures indicating to him when they were actually rolling. With the camera ship only needing less than half an hour to refuel after a significant stint in the sky as well, Cavill also barely even got a breather in between these no doubt grueling takes. But that's what you sign up for when you agree to take on the undisputed king of action and the sky, apparently, I suppose. Bodies of water with a black bottom cause some legit concerns. Stranger Things. Returning to literal troubling waters now, and to the shot of Stranger Things lifeguard Heather suddenly bursting out of an ice bath in season 3 before being dragged into the abyss. Again confessing to not being a person who gets their kicks out of large bodies of water, particularly ones that possess a dark black bottom. The idea of being dragged down into this liquid over and over again was terrifying for actor Francesca Reel. And if that wasn't enough, Reel also had a mechanism locked onto her foot for said yanking. But this wasn't simply a case of being swiftly pulled and flailing around as one likely would do in real life. The actor was under specific orders to hold her arms up above her head and not move them, scream without creating bubbles, and keep her eyes wide open, all while having to overcome a fear of ominous bodies of water. Charming. All that being said, though it was unquestionably incredibly hard, Rhea would admit to it being one of the most fun stunt-esque sequences she's had the opportunity to do, and hopes to do more going forward. Rather her than me. Sprinting scene very nearly ended Henry Cavill's action career, The Witcher. The fact Henry Cavill almost ended his action career in the thick of filming his second outing as Geralt of Rivia for Netflix's The Witcher series may actually have played into his decision to quit while he's ahead. Jumping back to December 2020, the leading man was reportedly injured in the middle of shooting a sequence involving an assault course, with it being said that the star was clearly in a lot of pain. Later down the road though, it was reported that Cavill actually tore his hamstring while sprinting around in the woods, with Princess Cyrilla of Sintra actor Freya Allen being present at the moment of her co-star's sudden pulling up, and herself performing a similar sequence to Cavill in the time leading up to his hamstring injury. Despite being able to push through the pain and complete the second season, however, the British sensation would eventually confess that he was constantly battling with trying to fight through the injury, and not going too far to the point where he tore the hamstring even more and potentially ended his action career altogether. Classing it as his worst moment of the past year professionally back in 2021, it was probably a wise call to leave the witching to Liam Hemsworth going forward after all.